Regarding LVO, I might be interested in going if Dennis can't, because I will have one fewer kid to pay for. Let me phrase that correctly.
Did you kill one of your kids?
No. One of them is turning 18 and graduating high school and moving on to college.
Wait a minute. One fewer kid. What?
No, I knew what he meant.
One fewer kid to fund, maybe.
Okay.
Welcome to Preferred Enemies, the Warhammer 40k podcast. It's about ready to run the gauntlet. I'm your host, Rob.
Kevin. Dennis.
And Richard.
And yes, we talked about it a couple of episodes ago when, Dennis, you were not with us. Because we talked about, well, we could talk about Nachmund Gauntlet, the new Crusade book, but you had specifically asked that we not do that until you were here because you wanted to talk about it. And then we had Emperor's Children to talk about, so we had to kind of punt that a bit. So here we are, all together, and finally we're going to talk about the new Crusade Nachmund Gauntlet book.
Yep, better late than never.
Better late than never. But first we have, besides some news and new release announcements to talk about, we have a correction to issue. God, it's been a long time.
Not since Leicester Mail.
Yeah. So we do have a correction, and this is in regards, and some people have actually called us out on this, and it's good to know that you're actually listening, because that makes us feel like we're still vaguely relevant. So in our Emperor's Children episode, we talked about the tormentors specifically having sticky objectives, and the way that they are phrased says that you control an objective until a opponent beats your level of control on the objective at the end of a phase. And because this is a newer wording of sticky objectives than we have had on past units, like I'm looking at Chaos Space Marine cultists say you control an objective, it remains under your control even if you have no models within range until your opponent controls it at the start or end of any turn.
Or a good one I'll say, Rob, is if you look at the index version of the Eldar. Yeah, they just Storm Guardians. Yeah, the Storm Guardians. I'm blanking. They did say that before, and now in the new index, they do talk about level of control.
Right.
So they're rewording all of them to this new wording.
Right, but they haven't gone in and eroded the older ones yet, and this is one of the difficulties of having rules in print that don't always get eroded. Digital rules, please, at a reasonable price, GW. But because of this new wording, it looks like we misinterpreted what that wording means. So the way here is the wording of the Tormentors, just so we're all on the same page. Objective defiled. At the end of your command phase, if this unit is within range of an objective marker you control, that objective marker remains under your control until your opponent's level of control over that objective marker is greater than yours at the end of a phase. Now, when we parsed this out, we read it, it's like, okay, well, your level of control. We kind of read that as the Tormentors set the level of control on the objective. So a unit of 10 would have a level of control of 20, and then you move off the objective, somebody has to beat that 20. That does not appear to be correct. And Dennis, you want to take this one? Since I know you were the one that brought this up to us.
Well, how it's worded also is you recheck your level of control for all objectives at the end of every phase.
Right.
So once you've moved the Tormentors off, well, suddenly you have 0 on there because your level of control is 0. Your opponent's level of control is 0. You still control it, though, because your opponent's has not beat yours. So all this is doing is it's overriding the rule that says if your level of control is the same, nobody controls it. So what, in essence, this is it's the old sticky as we knew it of you control it until your opponent puts anything with OC on top of it.
Right. Now, I will say one difference is if you look at the older ones, they do say end of turn. And this one does specify end of phase. So technically, this is a slightly less powerful version of Sticky by that regard.
That is correct, yes.
So it's interesting. It'll be to see if this gets applied. And as you pointed out, like the new Guardians, like Storm Guardians, have this similar wording in the Codex, but obviously when they did the indexed Codex update, but we have several print codexes not going back that far timeline wise that have this particular wording or have the original wording, and that it's just now. I'm gonna look real quick at Astra Militarum to see if they have a similar wording. Okay, Cadian shock troops. So this is the codex right before Eldari. So this is the codex at the beginning of the year. Still has the old wording of even if you have no models within range of it, opponent controls at the start or end of any turn. No mention of level of control. So level of control wording was introduced with Eldari. So we're talking brand new wording.
Yeah.
So that's that. I think that's why when we saw why is it mentioning level of control? Oh, it must be the OC that you stick onto it. No, you're right. It's the current level of control.
I think GW made it more complex to have it line up with how they have it in their documents. It just confused people because of how it's worded now until people get used to it.
Yeah, right. I want to say the first time we had this wording was one of the Christmas detachments.
Ooh, you might be right.
Maybe? Like the Tyranid one, maybe.
Well, and I'm pretty sure
cults. Something in one of those detachments had this wording.
And those would have probably been written after Eldar.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, synaptic micronodes as a stratagem. Select one objective marker you control that units within range of. That objective marker remains under your control until your opponent's level of control over that objective marker is greater than yours at the end of the phase. So yeah, Grotmus is where this started getting introduced, which, like you said, would have been written after the Astra Militarum Codex, most likely, because of the print times and such.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good call. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, good catch, Richard. Yeah, so I'm surprised that we didn't get like an update in the most recent balanced data slate, because it seems like that would have been a thing that
don't know that it would go there, but in developers' notes is where I think this should go, of an explanation of it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the reason I'm thinking balanced data slate is because we have like those abilities that say like the core rules changes, like, hey, things that allow you to set up more than 3 inches or within 3 inches lets you set up within 6 inches now. Or anything that reduces AP only works for one set of attacks rather than an entire phase. It's like you could say abilities that make objectives sticky now check at the end of every phase. Like you could rework them all right there. It's just that at the point the balanced data slate was made, none of them were worded that way either, because the Grotmus detachments didn't come out until like halfway through the balanced data slate.
Right.
So I imagine our next balanced data slate, which should be this month, right? If they're quarterly now. Editor Rob here. The latest balanced data slate did in fact come out in the middle of editing, and we'll be talking about it next episode.
It should be soon. Like I did see on, I think, Auspex Tactics, they posted a video about some leaked finger quotes updates to the balanced data slate, and they were like, yeah, these are probably fake, but yeah, it should be coming around the corner.
Right.
Oh, I'm hoping one of those leaked ones is true, though, because one of those leaked ideas is Votann do judgment tokens, not part of their detachment. But
Votann don't deserve good things.
Votann do. I mean,
yeah, I didn't actually watch the video, like, because I was like, I'm not going to spend 20 minutes going over what's probably fake rumors, because I just didn't have time. But I did see that video came out recently, so I was like, oh, we must be approaching a new balanced data slate because the fake rumors are coming out.
Let's see. Eldari might get nerfed. I'm just going like the high points. Votann might get army rule rewrite. Eldari might get nerfs. Orcs might get new detachment. Slanesh demons nerf.
Why do Eldari need more nerfs? Eldari do not need more nerfs.
Because the Custode Solar Spearhead nerfs. Vague
detachments.
I mean, why not at this point?
Right.
I mean, and actually know why I didn't watch the video, because the title of the video is Dodgy 40K Balance, finger quotes, leaks. And I'm like, and then it's like, full contents, and are they fake? I don't know. That's not going to convince me to watch that video.
Fair.
I mean, I'll say Auspex Tactics, he is very upfront.
He is
about,
very
like,
good, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, he's kind of like that same way. It's like, oh, this is rumors. Yeah, this is what the rumors say, but I don't know. But he does also point out that all the Emperor's Children leaks were very accurate.
True. That's true. So yeah,
there's been some good sourcing out there, and and of course, there's always the possibility that it's GW leaking things ahead of time just to kind of prime the pump for people to be outraged, to maybe be less outraged. Good luck on that.
Sorry, that was funny.
I mean, it's war gamers. If there's two things we hate, it's change and when they stay the same.
Exactly.
Speaking of changes, though, we've got a couple of things to talk about tournament-wise. It's big tournament-wise, grand tournament-wise, one might even say. So, yes, I know. So, first of all, the Warhammer Open is no longer the U.S. Open exclusively.
Boo.
We now have
USA. USA. Sorry.
Dude. Read the room.
Read the room. Maybe not the right time. Sorry. Sorry.
We have our first Canadian Open, June 13th through 15th in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada.
Nice. That is my birthday weekend, so means I will not be going. But otherwise I might have.
I'd say it's also probably good they picked a summer date
for Canada. I'm just going to point out that I think they may have opened up this location knowing that there's probably a lot of Canadian players not too keen to go to Tacoma right now. Yeah. I mean, elbows up, folks, but to our Canadian brethren, I don't blame you.
Yeah.
Because we have in the past strived to kind of keep this a relatively neutral broadcast, although we all have our own personal opinions of things going on. But you know what? This whole tariff and goading Canadians is stupid. I'm just going to put that out there.
Yeah.
It's stupid.
Dumb.
I don't have I don't have any other way to say it. It's absolutely stupid, and good on the Canadians for using this as an opportunity to band together and say, yeah, we're not going to put up with it. I think one of the best comments I saw was Canadians have two modes, I'm sorry and you're going to be sorry. And I have a feeling we're going to be seeing the latter before long. But I will say that I think good on GW for reading the room and being like, maybe we should create an event for people who maybe aren't all that keen to spend money in the US right now.
Yeah. No, I think it's a good move. Definitely. I mean, there's a thriving Warhammer community in Canada anyway. So get an event up there anyway, regardless of the other situations, it's a good move.
Right.
And yeah, like I said, it's I would absolutely be interested in going and supporting it, other than the fact that it is literally my birthday weekend. So, and I cannot travel. I have too many other trips already planned.
Yeah. Including one that just got moved.
And I probably won't go this year either.
Because the other big event is obviously Las Vegas Open. We've already had Las Vegas Open. You guys recorded from Las Vegas Open. That was 4 episodes ago. So
we've had one Vegas Open. What about a second Vegas Open?
So you're saying the hobbits are invading?
I mean, yes.
The hobbits are going to Vegas Town, to Vegas Town, to Vegas Town. The hobbits are going to Vegas Town.
I mean, I am building a squad army, so sure. Anyway.
But yes, the Las Vegas Open has moved dates, and they've moved to a later date this year. Specifically, what was it? October 2nd through 5th in 2025 at the Expo Center at World Market Center, Las Vegas.
Yeah, I definitely won't be able to go because I cannot make 2 Vegas trips in a month.
Are you doing another Vegas?
Because I'm doing We Were Young Festival this year, which is 2 weeks later. Yeah, I can't do 2 Vegas trips this year. Damn it. Or 3 Vegas trips. Oh, no. This is me realizing in real time that all of my money is disappearing. And that's before I buy a car.
Yeah. He's got to do one of those because it got folded. But
yeah, safety features in new cars are really amazing. Yes.
He's okay. Don't worry, everybody. Kevin's okay.
I'm fine. Yeah, literally the only like scratch on me was like I had like a burn mark on my arm where the airbag deployed.
God, isn't that a weird feeling? Because like I remember like the one time I've been in an accident where the airbags deployed, like the hair on like my wrists was just gone from the cordite blowing the airbag out.
So in retrospect, the funniest part of this, because I could say this knowing that I'm not hurt and everything is like fine. When the airbag deployed, it knocked my glasses off my face because like it just exploded in my face, pushed me back like that. So when the car stopped and like I'm like figuring out what's going on because just in a car wreck, just had the airbag pop in my face. I'm also like, why is everything blurry? Oh my god, I have a concussion. Oh wait, no, I just don't have my glasses on. Oh, thank God.
Okay, Velma.
But like literally, like that was my first instance. Like, oh my god, do I have a concussion? Why is everything blurry? Nope. Turns out I'm just blind.
Narrator, he did not, in fact, have a concussion.
I
just
mean,
blind.
as someone who is also pretty blind without my glasses, I can understand that.
Yeah.
And no, the blindness did not have anything to do with the accident. They hit me. Anyway, sorry, back to Vegas.
Yeah, back to Vegas. And so it's been moved when they announced like that they were going to switch the end of the ITC season, which of course is now managed by Games Workshop. They were having that at the World Championships rather than at LVO, having LVO not exactly but kind of sort of kick off the season.
Mm-hmm.
The decision has been made to move LVO to just before the end of the season. So it's kind of like the big finale before the grand narrative, like before the World Championships.
Yeah.
Like the big event. So I totally get why they did that. Also, apparently they had to change locations because wherever they are at now is not or like the hall they're moving to is not available the weekend of the original.
Yeah.
LVO?
So, well, as Dennis and I were talking about this in our LVO coverage, the Rio was just they had expanded and like had reached the limit of that space. So they needed to move, and they're moving to the Expo Center. But the Consumer Electronics Art Show CES is in January at the Expo Center. So I'm sure that probably like messed up the timing and stuff there. And I think for LVO, like I think they would probably prefer being closer to the end. They know they're not going to be the end anymore because that's now the World Championships in Atlanta. But moving them closer to the end makes their event like more important in the grand scheme of things. Like they're the largest tournament in the world. They're always going to be important. But I think it positions them a little bit better. So yeah, like it's disappointing because I liked having the event in January. As a nice, winter escape. There's no winner, but
Yeah, I think I'm on the other side of this. I think I understand why they're doing it. I'm thrilled that they're changing locations because, as we said in ours, it was out of space. It was elbows to elbows. It was crowded. But I like the idea of the LVO being the kickoff, like the first thing.
Yeah,
and also it's at a time. It was at a great time to do announcements for like the new year for 40K.
Mm-hmm.
With them being right before the grand narrative, like only a month away, we might get hints of things at LVO, but the bigger reveals will save until the grand narrative World Championships. And so I don't know. I kind of hope that this is just a one-off thing, and then they'll eventually get back to being the initial like kickoff of the 40K or the ITC like year, but I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, because that basically leaves us with nothing between like grand narrative, like as far as major events.
Adepticon.
Yeah, basically nothing between grand narrative and Adepticon, which it's winter and that sucks for traveling for most places. Well, maybe we need to have some place in the the global south.
Yeah,
like a big Australian event or something, because it'll be the middle of summer there.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
I do wonder if, because I know like the well, not at ITC, Frontline Gaming does have other events. Like I believe they have, I think it's the Cherokee Open that's in March. I wonder if if Frontline tries to move one of their other events, like the Bay Area Open or Las Vegas Open, or not Las Vegas, the LA Open. Sorry, I said Vegas, meant Los Angeles. Tries to move one of those into that winter slot because
I could see that.
like I think it's pretty obvious that there would be an opening for that.
And then just maybe have that grow enough to be something that Games Workshop puts its effort behind, like the Adepticons and the Novas.
Yeah, exactly. So it'll be interesting because I think you'll see, the Cherokee Open in North Carolina is in February. Then they do, what's the one here? The Rocky Mountain Open in March. So like they have other events that they might just, shift around and try to move something earlier. I mean, something obviously in the Global South would be awesome, but something, just in like Texas, California, Arizona, where it's warmer in the winter might not be bad for that January slot either.
True.
Texas would be, because they already...
Do I need to get a group together and start running an event here in Phoenix?
I'd say there already is a Frontline Gaming event in Dallas.
Yeah.
So if they moved that to January to fill that hole, I'd kind of be for that because it's local. I like local.
Yeah, I agree.
Let's see. And what else do we have? Oh, yeah, we have a Kill Team announcement. Now, again, this is not primarily a Kill Team podcast, but we... a lot of the models can be, are usable in 40K. We loved seeing the new
I've got units of Jaegers.
Yep. So the new thing that's been revealed as of last week was the Kill Team Blood and Zeal box. Now, this was one that was rumored to be like World Eaters versus Grey Knights. Well, it turns out it's half right. It's not Grey Knights. But instead it is like Khorne cultist, World Eater-ish, like jackals with sick robot legs.
God, I love the design of these guys so much. Like, I love the idea that, like, oh, they had an encounter with the Bloodletter, so now they're making themselves look more like the Khorne's perfect image. That's so cool. that's such a Khorne thing to do.
It very much is. And then on the other side is a group called the Sanctifiers, some ecclesiarchal militiamen. So there's like and all of these, like, whereas the goremongers, which are the jackal cultists, they all have basically the same aesthetic. Like, they're pretty consistent throughout. The Sanctifiers are all very unique models. So, like, you've got a confessor with like a big like metal mitre helmet and like furred collar and a big mace. There's a cherub with like a taser goad, a conflagrator, which is just like a zealot with a pair of hand flamers, a pair of missionaries, one with a flamer, one with a melt-a-gun. And these feel like throwbacks to like the old missionary models with like the book on the backpack, which I have one of those painted up at like one of the local stores. And like looking at this, it's like, man, that is the same vibe as that back then. So I really dug that. A male death cult assassin, which is something we haven't seen before. The Drill Abbot, who is just a guy with some self-inflicted facial scars and a big hammer and a skull in a box. The Persecutor, who has one of those nice chainsaw flamer combos.
I love inquisitorial weirdos.
Yeah. The Salvationist, who is just like a preacher in like an anonymous mask. The Reliquant, who has like a simulacrum, like reliquary and a hand flamer. And then the Miraculist, who has decided to do a DIY stigmata kit.
Okay. See, my question though, Rob, is this an Adeptus Sororitas unit or an Agents of the Imperium unit?
Too soon to tell. Until we have 40K rules for using them, we won't know. I could see it going either way. I could even see two different sets of data sheets, depending on which book you want to run them from.
True.
Because obviously we can't have nice, consistent things.
I mean, I'm going to pick these guys up because, well, I'm going to pick this box up because I want the awesome, like, blood cultists who seem... in comparison less intense than the priests, I don't know. Like maybe that's just me. Like the guys that are cutting their legs off and replacing them with robot legs to like impress a blood god seem less intense.
I mean, Kevin, they're just doing something that the Mechanicus would think is normal.
Exactly. It's like in the grand scheme of 40K, this feels less weird. But like, I mean, depending on what the rules for these guys are, like, I want to just have these guys and run them as like inquisitorial henchmen. Like, there's so many cool things.
You just want those guys and use them as jackals.
Well, I mean, yeah, I could also do that too. It turns out it's not a big leap between like, different flavors of heresy.
All right, Kevin, I have an idea for you. You're going to have to mod the legs onto Crute for your Tau World Leaders army.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
That's
Crute with eviscerators and dual pistols and stuff. Oh,
that would be so cool. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm down.
And as far as terrain, this one does include a piece of terrain, but not a new piece of terrain. This contains the big, like, angelic sororitas model that was in the the Basilicanum Shrine that like used to be like the sisters like faction fortification. It is now a standalone statue, and the article does even include the fact that the in-depth hobby guide will teach you how to desecrate the statue to honor the chaos gods.
No,
it's fairly easy. Get me a hobby file. Give me a hobby knife, a file, and a pot of blood for the blood god, and I'll make that thing. No. I'll make it sing for chaos.
The statue is cool already. You don't need to defile it.
It is cool. It is really cool. I mean, it is really cool. Yes, I do have to defile it. I don't know what you're talking about.
But yeah, another box that just looks really cool for Kill Team. And yeah, the models in this, especially the Imperium side, is just
right
over the top.
I do love the gigantic chain axes, though, on these cultists.
What I also wonder is if some of these, like, I could see the Confessor being an alternate loadout for a Munitor, like the Priest, where like it's like, okay, you can have the chainsaw and flamer, or you can have like the auto pistol, or you can have just a big power mace.
I honestly would not be 100% surprised if these options, like these weapon loadouts, just become options in like an updated henchman data sheet.
Right.
Or they might never go that way, just like our old like double claw Terminators.
Yeah, or they just never make it into 40K proper, and you just use these models to represent other things, which I'm also cool with.
Because like
these
one of
models are so good though.
Like the Persecutor already has like the Eviscerator Flamer, so you don't even have to do it for a data sheet. It's just an alternate model for that same loadout. So.
Yeah, and some of the other ones like the Salvationist, the Reliquant, like standard bearer, like that's easy enough. So I don't know. I think it goes either way on whether they actually get an updated data sheet for these guys in 40K. But I'm gonna pick the models up because they're cool looking.
They are absolutely cool looking. But I think that's pretty much all the news and new releases. Obviously, later on in the recording, we may have information on what's going up for pre-order next week. Obviously, Emperor's Children went up on pre-order, and they're gone. So that went really fast.
Wow.
UK, I think, sold out in 30 minutes from their website.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, US, I think, lasted a couple of hours, but Emperor's Children went fast, and good luck for y'all who bought it. Good luck. But anyway, moving on. We have a book to discuss. So as promised, we are going to look at the Crusade Nachmund Gauntlet book, which is basically a follow-up to the Vigilus campaign that we had in like 8th and 9th edition. And so the Nachmund Gauntlet, if you are not aware, is basically a stable path through the Great Rift, like the one of the few stable paths and the largest stable path between Imperium Sanctus, which is the side that has Terra on it, and Imperium Nihilus, which is the far side that has been cut off from the rest of the Imperium by the Great Rift. And a lot of battles were fought on the Nihilist side at Vigilus, which sits at one end of the gauntlet. At the other end of the gauntlet, on the Imperium Sanctus side, is the planet of Sangua Terra. And the goal of Abaddon has been to, because like he wants to separate the two halves of the Empire, because, you know, divide and conquer. The goal was, okay, so we'll take the Vigilus half, which has not happened yet. Vigilus is still held by the Imperium. And then he sent Harken Worldclaimer, his basically major domo second in command, to take Sangua Terra, with a fleet moving through the gauntlet and popping out to attack the Imperium Sanctus side. And I'm going to say, the short version doesn't go well for the Imperium on this one. Like, Sangua Terra already had some issues, like, not long after the rift opened, because there was what they call the Sanguis Flare. Basically, a big arm of the warp, like a warp storm, washed over Sangua Terra, and when it withdrew, their moon had gone demon world, which is not good for anyone.
Except demons.
Well, okay, it's good for demons. Fair enough. But also, like, along the path of the Nachmund Gauntlet, there's the planet of the world of Derivar, which is a Chaos Knight noble world. So there's an entire Chaos Knight house that's based off of that system that's just off the main path through the Gauntlet. And there's kind of like a summary of the battles leading up to this particular campaign early on in the book, where they just kind of cover like the battle on Vigilus, and where they thought, you know, Marnius Calgar was thought dead, but he didn't actually die, but everybody thinks he's dead. So he's become like an imperial saint to a lot of people, which has helped rally forces in the Imperium and has helped them push off the attacks on Vigilus. It mentions that like Celestine is a big part of the Vigilus fight, and like defeats 2 demon lords, you know, in one-on-one combat, and then an entire continent on Vigilus blows up in like a warp explosion, and the demon and Celestine are gone afterwards. But at that point, Harken Worldclaimer is on his way to Sangua Terra, and so the Imperium knows he's coming, and even though they have a demon world moon sitting right above their planet, they decide that it's time to try to mount as much of a defense as they can, even though they know they are going to be massively outnumbered. They do give the levels of forces that are involved, and it's impressive. Something like, on the invaders' side, 103 Chaos Knights.
Gosh.
Compared to like,
I always visioned like each of those like worlds that a knight has like maybe 5 knights.
No, there's a lot more than that.
Man.
Yeah. So yeah, like 103 Chaos Knights versus about 20 lances, which lances are usually what, 3? So you're talking like 60 to 103 plus 14 free blades. So like just on the knight side. Now, to be fair, the Imperiums also have a Titan maniple.
Well, that helps.
Which
does help.
And if the Imperium has Canis Rex, no, I don't care how many Chaos Knights they win, because Canis Rex rules, right?
Unfortunately, Canis Rex does not appear to be there. But there's a lot of Sisters of Battle there. Like the Sororitas have several basically equivalent of companies on the planet. Junith Erudia is like the supreme leader of the forces there on Sangua Terra.
That's what I thought was really cool, is reading about her in here.
Yeah. You've got the Guardians of the Covenant chapter, which is not their entire chapter, but like their 3rd, 4th, and 7th companies, plus several other strike forces from various chapters. The like Astra Militarum, 203 regiments of Cadian shock troops, 125 regiments of Death Corps, 46 battalions of like Udine Jade Guard, Gehenna Silence, 72 regiments, 34 batteries of mobile artillery, just 12 armored companies from the Yantish Fire Lance, just a whole bunch of guard, various PDF forces, 71 demi-brigades of Thesian heavy gunners. I mean, the list is huge, and yet the Imperium is outnumbered on this.
Yeah.
Because also, along with their battle fleets are outnumbered, and Harkon is borrowing Abaddon's flagship, the Planet Killer. So basically the whole thing starts with the Void War, and the Void War doesn't last long on the Imperium side. Like their ships are outnumbered.
They win so quickly? Oh.
Yeah, no. And in fact, Harkon had captured some Imperial ships from like earlier on in the Gauntlet, like the fighting around Vigilus, and had kept them externally undefiled so that they looked like standard Imperium ships. And he just kind of like put very basic crews of like slave helots and captured repurposed servitors on the ships. And of course they're broadcasting legit authorization codes. So they get through, and the Imperium forces are like, oh, okay, look, it's just one of ours. It's a fleet from Vigilus. Oh, crap, there's a bunch of chaos stuff behind it. And they get surprised and defeated.
What's the name of that ship? Sir, she's one of ours.
And so, yeah, basically, like it's a little bit of a delaying action, but not much. There's a good number of chaos ships that are destroyed, but not nearly enough. And the chaos forces make landfall. They also make a deal with the demonic entity that controls that demon world moon, named Chorkan, who is a demon lord. It doesn't really state which god Chorkan serves, but I'm pretty sure it's Tzeentch from some of the descriptions of like its servitors. But basically a number of the chaos warlords going into battle at Harkon Worldclaimer's command swear themselves to Chorkan and like have his sigil carved upon their armor to gain his power. And honestly, at the Imperium starts off giving as kind of as good as they get, because it talks a lot about how a lot of the forces that land do suffer defeats. Like there's one where like the Death Guard drop a force and they thought they had inserted plague cultists into the planet to undermine the defenses before they land, and unfortunately the plague cultists were like, okay, we're gonna go in hiding, and we'll wait for the moment to be right, and while they were hiding they all died of plague.
Oops.
And so when the Death Guard show up, it's like, oh crap, the defenses are still up.
So the funniest part of that is knowing that Nurgle's like, whatever.
Right.
Nurgle's like,
got
whatever. It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
It worked out the way it wanted to.
And yeah, it mentions that disproportionately a lot of the ones who had sworn themselves to Chorkan ended up having this kind of bad luck. And so where they land, the Imperium actually does much better. But the main target for Harkon himself is Urbano Sprawl Alpha, the capital of the planet. That's where Junith Iruta is based, and she's like, okay, I have to send forces out to all the various sprawl cities and defense points to try to slow down the Chaos advance, which I know is going to leave me with fewer defenses, but we just have to dig in and try and hold off as strongly as possible. I'm not going to go through all the individual battles, but again, it does not go well. There's a Night Lord's leader who's kind of one of the higher ups in the whole structure of Harkon's battle fleet, who has special fear torpedoes made out of brains.
Fear torpedo.
Made out of like psyker brains. He detonates one of them above like the Imperial defenses, and like the guardsmen just start dying of fear and running, like just going mad. Not all of them, they're able to kind of like, some of them are able to hold together, but in the end they're like, there's an Inquisitor Cardivalnus is more or less in charge of the forces around what's called the Tower of Murmuration, which is the astropathic tower for the city. And they're like, okay, we got to fall back. We cannot control this our forces are too shattered. We have to run away. There's the giant planetary guns of the Emperor's Voice. The Guardians of the Covenant Space Marines are put in charge of that, and they're having to fight off the Chaos Knights, who are going. And it's like Space Marines versus Chaos Knights. Well, not great, but they do have the Titan Maniple helping them. Yeah. But unfortunately, even then, it's like they're still outnumbered, and there's a bunch of demons coming from the Demon Moon. So at one point, the master of the Space Marine forces there is like, yeah, we've got to retreat. We can't possibly win this fight, and we'll just sacrifice our lives for nothing. So fighting retreat, and they give up the planetary guns.
What kind of Space Marine is that? You're not going to die in a heroic last stand? Coward.
I mean, sometimes some of them use tactics.
It doesn't seem right.
Are you saying that's why they got rid of tactical Marines and went for intercessors?
Now, one cool thing, though, is that so there's that cloud of fear brain dust that's like hovering over one of the battlefields because of that fear torpedo. That's the only way I can describe it. Fear brain dust. Junith Aruda sends like one of her preceptory forces out to use flamers and like, because there's also Night Lords coming down and like Night Lord Raptors coming down and Hell Drakes and such. And so she sends them all out there, like use flamers and like burn up into the sky. And like this weird conflagration, like the fire starts rising and the cloud starts bubbling away. And there ends up being this, they describe it as a pyro or a psychoclastic mass. And then all of a sudden, like it lights up and separates, and light and doves come out, and Celestine arrives along with a bunch of Zephyrim and Seraphim.
Celestine Chaos confirmed. Got it.
Yeah.
No. Celestine come to purge the chaos.
Yeah.
I don't think so. That doesn't seem right.
And so, again, short form of this, they're finally driven back to just the fortress at the center of the city, the Perfectus Bastion. And finally, Celestine tells Junith Aruda, look, we have to leave. Like it's like, yes, you could fight and martyr yourself here, but I'm telling you, this does nothing. It will just make it a bigger victory for them, because if they take you, they'll just use you as to demoralize everyone else. If you leave to fight another day to come back and try to retake this planet, you'll be doing more good. And as much as she hates hearing like, yeah, we need to run away, she's like, yeah, but it's the Imperial Saint telling me this, so I suppose I should go.
Yeah,
and so
that's probably fair.
So yeah, they lead an evacuation to get off the planet. It is a gravely fought fighting retreat. The Titan Maniple are all destroyed. The two Reavers are basically defeated either by demons tearing up the mechanics and the legs so they can't move any further, or actually like getting into the cockpit and killing the Princeps inside. The Warlord Titans that is there finally like waits for enough demons and Chaos Knights to get close and then blows the reactor. And they try to get as many people out. The last being to escape is Celestine. She's the last one to get onto the final dropship. She's burnt. She's covered in wounds. One of her arms is broken. She'll be better. She'll be fine.
Yeah, she'll recover. It's fine.
They collect, like, people are collecting her blood off of the deck plates of the shuttle she's on.
That can't be hygienic.
No, generally isn't. But yeah,
make it into potions.
But yeah, this is one of like, usually when we have these narrative books, it's left like very vague how it's actually going to resolve. It's like, okay, there's these battles back and forth, and now a third force comes in. It's real, and who knows what's going to happen next? And in this one, it's like, no, we know what happens. Imperium loses. They don't get wiped out. Yes.
I mean, you don't see the epilogue where the Emperor gets off his chair, teleports here, and then just makes chaos go away.
That's heresy, sir.
Right.
Arbiter Ian did a whole video recently on the Inquisition, and I think that is a very particular brand of radical heresy.
Exactly. It is very interesting that this they chose to do this narrative right now, because the last Crusade book that we did, I forget what the name it was now, but it covered
Prime Nexus.
Pariah Nexus, that covered the 2022 Grand Narrative. I was kind of expecting this to be the 2023 Grand Narrative campaign book, and it's not. Like, this is an event that happened, in lore, like, and maybe that's why it resolved a little bit differently, because this is a event that, they created, like, it wasn't necessarily an event that was fleshed out at, like, the Grand Narratives, like some of the other ones have been, or will be. So, yeah, so that was kind of interesting that it ended in a different way than some of the other ones did.
Yeah, and I noticed that this feels more like one of the older, like, Forge World style narrative books, where it's like this, you've got your, like, the disposition of battle, like the list of all the forces, and here's the battlefield in the map wise what they're fighting over, and then chapter by chapter it's telling how, like, the Imperial forces are getting corralled into a final point, and then they have to do a fighting withdrawal, and at the end, how the campaign pans out. And you do get an epilogue where Harken Worldclaimer has taken the Perfectus Bastion, and even though one of the goals, like, Juna Tharuta had was to, like, there's all this data there that they wanted to keep from getting into the Chaos Force's hands, they were not able to wipe the data in time. In fact, like, some of the, like, the heretic tech magi showed up and they're like, okay, we're going to start untangling, like, we were able to stop the data from being deleted, so it's going to take them time to kind of parse through it and figure out what's useful from it. And the whole time there's this box that's there that's, like, gurgling and breathing, and it kind of, like, mentions it at the beginning of the 2-page epilogue, and then it mentions it at the end. And, like, Harken is basically like, yeah, we took the capital, we took a whole bunch of other little spots on the planet, but this is going to be the big one. This is where, like, when Abaddon finally takes this world for himself, this will be where it all, like, really, it's all really focused. And, like, for all of you that are here are going to be rewarded. You're going to get slaves and weapons and ships. You'll get data. Also, all of you signed yourself over to Chorkon. He tosses a helmet out that's from, like, one of the warlords that turned himself over. It's like, yeah, you were all basically used by Chorkon and he took you all. So that's what you get for trying to think that you were going to be better than the War Master. And it's like,
yeah, that checks out.
And his lieutenant, like the one from the Night Lords, is like, you gave them all the demon? It's like, yeah, they gave themselves. That was their own fault. And of course, the Chorkon's demonic emissary there just kind of laughs at that. And then it's revealed what's the box. So I had to look this up because this goes back to the Vigilus, like the Warzone Vigilus books back in, like, 8th edition. There was Lord Admiral Priska, who was the head of the fleet that was fighting off Harken Worldclaimer's fleet there at, like, the end of those books. And her flagship was destroyed, and she was assumed to have been lost. And I'm just going to read this little bit, and y'all can be perfectly disturbed. The gurgling hisses of the device at the Strategium's rear grew louder as Harken approached. It was not intentionally kept secret, but had been placed out of sight as Harken considered its appearance too distracting to his commanders to be on show. A biological mass was melded to the device's concave face, wires and pipes perforating it in patterns that owed much of their design to Natar's sorcerers. Dangling loops of knotted flesh like cauliflower pearls on lengths of tanned hide connected the stumps of brown teeth. Fleshy sacs quivered, some appeared barely stable and fit to burst, others like hardened gelatine stretched tight over clusters of knuckles. Organ fragments, gristle, and lank strands of gray hair were stitched together, drawn up in folds around one eye. Runes were tattooed in profusion over the flesh, in metals and blood and ground bone. You will help me reach inside Sector Command. The knowledge still inside you, your ciphers, Nemo codes, names, numbers, and plans, will unlock one door after another until this sector serves the War Master. What was left of Lord Admiral Priska's mind understood a little of what Harken had said. The movement of air as the Worldclaimer left rippled through a flap of skin and past what was left of a larynx, drawing forth the echo of a moan. Yeah, these are the bad guys. That is somehow still worse than what the Imperium does. Only slightly, but yeah. So she was lost, but not killed. She's been turned into a decrypting device.
As I liked, is one of my favorite TV shows of all time. When they find us, they'll kill us, they'll eat us, and they'll turn your skin into their clothing. And if you're really lucky, they'll do it in that order.
Yep. So anyway, let's get into the rules itself. I think we can easily skip the sections that are just the reprint of Crusade rules. Those have not really changed.
That's my one annoyance with Crusade all the times is they always separate out these are the core Crusade rules. It just makes it confusing because then they put other stuff in between the core Crusade rules and everything else.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm frustrated by that.
I am glad they reprint them, though, because that makes it so you don't have to buy, like, multiple books. You could just buy the one and have everything in it, so, but yeah.
I mean, I'll agree with that, but at the same time, if you're going to do it that way for all your books, just put all the rules together then.
Or like, as we've talked about before, make the core Crusade rules a digital download.
They are. They are.
Okay. So,
yeah.
Okay.
Crusade rules are a download. They have been since September. So they're printing them here for convenience sake. It's like if you're buying this book, the idea is this is the only book you need to have with you if you're running this campaign. And that's good. Like, that's not a bad thing.
For sure.
And it's not like it's a lot of rules. It's like 10, 12 pages.
Yeah.
It's not a lot. But then we get into the rules for the campaign itself and some of the rules that they've applied to this to make it different than past campaigns. And we touched on a little bit of these a couple episodes back, but we'll get into them at length here. So again, this is a campaign that can be they kind of intend you to split it between 3 different mega factions. The Guardians, who are the ones who are trying to protect the planet. The Spoilers, the ones who are trying to conquer it. And the Marauders, who are using the battle to do whatever, like get other forces to do what they want. So Guardians are typically Imperium, Despoilers are typically Chaos, and Marauders are typically Xenos. They don't have to be, but that is kind of the general assumption. And this one has some of the most jargon in this particular campaign. Because like there's a number of different kinds of points you're collecting that do different things, but it doesn't feel as easy as like the Blackstone from
I'll say
Nexus.
If you're not a fan of bookkeeping, don't go for this one because they've increased the bookkeeping.
God, so much bookkeeping. And I would also like to point out, this is not just the battle for Sangua Terra. This is specifically the battle for Urbano Sprawl Alpha. So do you want to do other battles on Sangua Terra? Too bad, they all are. It's all about Urban Sprawl Alpha.
Well, okay, and I'll go to my take on that. You've been the one who kind of turned me on at looking at Urban Conquest into a narrative or a campaign setting, and you've even modified the Urban Conquest. I see this as their kind of spin on, here's a version of Urban Conquest that we've tailored. I mean, it's definitely not as in-depth as Urban Conquest was, but you're fighting over an urban area for your campaign.
Yeah, and that's fair. And I do look at this and like, oh yeah, I see where like you've got basically the city. You're again, it's Urbano Sprawl Alpha. You're fighting over 4 particular locations. You're fighting to control those locations, and the whole point of the campaign is to earn campaign victory points. And one of the ways you earn campaign victory points is to establish control and fortify control on these particular segments of the city. And so in that respect, yeah, this does kind of feel like, I wouldn't say an updated version. This is, like you said, this is a very different than Urban Conquest, but it's Urban Conquest adjacent, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And each of the 4 sections has its own rule. Like if you control it, and you have, there's basically charts of the levels of control over each section for each of the 3 mega factions, which I do wish it wasn't so tightly tied to that specifically. I wish there was a little bit more flexibility in how you can run this, but it's like they have set out, this is how this is to be run for this particular campaign. It is very focused.
That's always the challenge, I think, for these Crusade books, is creating a tight narrative like for the book and the story, and making the Crusade rules flexible enough to cover that, but also to work in other situations. I think with a little bit of finesse, you could easily take this idea and, change the names and some of that other stuff. But yeah, I wish it was like 5% more generic in this case.
Right. And each of these 4 locations does have a bonus that you get for controlling it. So if you control the Prefectus Bastion, some of this will not quite make sense until we get into the some more details later. But like Prefectus Bastion, if you control that, you get to choose up to 4 reinforcement waves instead of 3. You're going to be dividing your force into like a core force and reinforcement waves. We'll get into the mechanics of that, but this gives you more options of things you can bring in. Emperor's Voice Grand Battery. If you control the planetary guns, then whenever somebody sets up a unit from strategic reserves, you can roll a d6 on a 5-up. The enemy unit takes mortal wounds as their
as their
dropship is hit.
Gunned. I like it.
The Tower of Murmuration, that communications tower. If your alliance controls this site, you can select an additional strategic goal at the start of the command phase. That's another way to get more points. But if you do, you have to discard one when it's time for scoring. So basically, it's like you can have 2 of them and decide which one you want to go after. And at the end, okay, we'll go after the one we actually earn more for.
This is for your alliance, not just the battle. This is for the whole phase.
Right. And then the spaceport, the Akrandor spaceport. While your alliance controls the site, you can perform up to 2 surgical deep strikes a turn. In addition, once per turn, when a unit in that player's army performs a surgical deep strike, they can re-roll the deep strike test. We'll get into those mechanics.
That's
in a
useful.
bit as well.
I will say when we get there, I am a fan of surgical deep strike. I think it's cool.
Heck yeah.
And then they basically say at the start of the campaign, everybody has a control level of 0. As you fight, you will raise your control level. The first time you get to control level 3, that's when you count as being controlled, which is when you get the site bonus. And at the end of the campaign, you get an extra victory point for each campaign victory point for each strategic site you control. When you get to, so basically it's like 0 to 1, you don't get anything. Once you get up to 2 control, you get a campaign victory point. Once you get to 3, you control it. Once you get to 5, it's considered fortified, and you get an additional campaign victory point. And then you also get campaign victory point for having control. So if you get up to fortified, you're getting 3 victory points for that location each phase. Now, how you determine what you control, you have to earn strategic asset points. This is a bookkeeping nightmare. Crusade's already a lot.
Yeah.
Well, to be fair, they're thinking if you already like Crusade, you're okay with bookkeeping. Here, have some more.
Have all the bookkeeping you can eat. Take it. Take all the points and track them. Enjoy it. So, you complete agendas. Agendas help you earn strategic asset points.
And agendas are what you'll do in each battle.
Right. But then so you have strategic goals, you have agendas, both of them can earn you strategic asset points. Then you assign your strategic asset points from a battle to one of the sites. And then whoever has met their strategic goal, you also get a strategic goal bonus. Then based on the size of the battle and whether you won or lost, you earn battle points. And then you have to assign each player assigns their battle points to one of the locations. And then based on who has the most battle points at a particular location, it increases the control level on that location. If this seems like a lot, it really is. It's very convoluted.
I mean, how I've interpreted is once you have your phase done or your battles done, you assign the points, you see who's winning, and then you reset it for the next game. And once you've done that for the entire thing, you'll have the end of the phase. So
right.
It's just worded with lots and lots of words, but it's like after battle, get points, assign points, get bonuses.
I think it'll make more. I mean, having not played this, I think it'll make more sense when you actually are doing it, because I get what they're trying to do. They're just explaining it poorly.
Yeah,
but GW's never had problems with explaining rules poorly. I don't know what you're talking about. And what's level of control? What?
So you have all your battle points, that you've assigned to various locations. Whoever has the most battle points alliance-wise for a particular location gets the most control level added, and it's increases based on what phase you're on. There are 3 phases. So like if you have the most in phase 1 and 2, it's worth 2 control points. If it's on phase 3, you get 3 control points. So you could decide to try to spread your control around, or maybe dump them all into one location. And again, that is alliance-wide, so it doesn't really matter how many players there are. It's still only going to be so much control level.
In a way, Kevin, this also slightly reminds me of LVO, because each planet had control over that planet that you were fighting for, but they did it by battles. Your battle had to be on that location, so you couldn't give your control points to other locations. But it was strategic for decide where to battle on which planets, because that's where you put your air quote points, because you put more people there to battle.
And I think you get a natural kind of ebb and flow of the battlefield over like the larger control, because you throw more resources into one area, other people are going to throw resources there, and you know there's that natural back and forth that happens, you know, in a campaign, in a battlefield. So I like it. I think there's probably a simpler way to do it, but I get what they're going for. Yeah.
So actually, after all the battle points have been assigned and you determine who gets the most control based on battle points, then you go off of the strategic asset points. Whoever has the most gets their strategic goal first, and then you go in descending order, because the strategic goals also give particular rewards, and the order of this might matter. So, and here's the example they give. At the end of the first phase of Nachmund Gauntlet campaign, the Guardians have a total of 12 battle points and 6 strategic points. The Despoilers have 8 battle points and 8 strategic asset points. The Marauders have 6 battle points and 9 strategic asset points. The Guardians collect their battle points rewards first, as they have the most, increasing their control level over each strategic site where they came first by 2, and each strategic site they came second by 1. The Despoilers then collect their battle point rewards, increasing their control level over strategic sites in the same way. Finally, the Marauders, who have the fewest battle points this round, collect their reward from battle points. After all the battle points rewards have been awarded, the Marauders, who have the most strategic asset points, collect their strategic goal rewards first, assuming they have met its requirements. Despoilers do likewise, and then finally the Guardians with the fewest strategic asset points do the same. So battle points get you direct control. Strategic asset points get you strategic goal bonuses.
Mm-hmm. I think that's an interesting way to do it. It's complicated. You have to track a lot, and that's the downside. But I think I like this kind of 2-tiered system where you get bonuses based off, because like we talked about at the other previous US Opens, things like that, it encourages you to try to accomplish multiple goals at the same time, or having to prioritize this goal over this goal, because this might give us a campaign bonus, this might give us a strategic bonus. So I like those interlocking competing systems. It's just, again, it's going to be a lot to track.
Right.
Although I said from going through more, I think you just really need to win, and then all your goals are getting met.
That's true too.
Also, I would say, look at Goonhammer's Administrata map, because I haven't checked to see if it's updated for Nachmund Gauntlet, but when we did Pariah Nexus, it was invaluable for running a Crusade campaign. I think in this case, it would also be very good for tracking this kind of stuff. Anything you can do to automate the number, the collection of data and the rankings and everything would be super useful. And so at the end of the campaign, whoever has the most campaign victory points takes control of the capital city and wins. If there's a tie and one side controls more strategic sites than the other, they win. If that's also a tie, then whoever has the most strategic asset points at the end of phase 3 wins. And if even that's a tie, then it's a tie all around, and the campaign ends undecisively. So your strategic goals. So we mentioned those. These are the things that you are trying to earn strategic asset points by doing your agendas.
Right.
So
you'll just pick each alliance will just pick one for each phase.
Right. Unless you have the Tower of Murmuration, then you get to pick 2 and then decide
pick whichever one you don't want. Yeah.
Right. And each of the phases, there's 3 phases. Each one has its own set of strategic goals. And each one has a set of strategic goals that are also only for particular factions. So, for example, Guardians have access to the counter strategies goal, which is your requirement is you gain more strategic points than one or more other alliances. You don't even have to be the most; you just have to beat somebody else. And in this case, the reward is claimed after all other alliances have claimed their rewards. So even if you had the most, you collect this one last. Your alliance gains a +1 control level in each strategic site that one or more opposing alliances have increased their control level over this campaign phase. So you beat somebody on strategic points, you see where somebody else has increased their control, you also get to increase control there. For a more generic one, there's Decisive First Strike. You select a strategic site. You assign more strategic points to that site than the combined points assigned by the other two alliances. You get +1 control there. So it's stuff like that. It's like, did you earn more points in this particular way? Then you get a bonus. Most of them are like +1 control level, and like it'll specify like +1 control level anywhere or at a particular site. When you get to phase 2, there are a couple that are -1 control level to your opponents. Like shifting priorities, here's one. Select 2 strategic sites where your alliance has an establishing foothold, which means level 1 or 2 control. Your alliance has assigned at least 1 strategic point per player in your alliance to those strategic sites. You lose 1 control level in both of them, but then you gain +3 in one of them. In one other strategic site. So it's like, okay, we put some points here, we're going to lose a little bit of control and then shift it to somewhere else and maybe take that one. So there's definitely a lot of, I know it's strategic goals with strategic assets points, but there's a lot of strategy involved here from like a macro level.
Yes,
this
doing map
feels
like it has... Like, your battlefield is like the micro level where you've got it, but it looks like this is like the War Masters playing a game at the macro level is what they've added on top of the Nachmund stuff.
Right. So this is it's a very complicated system, but past ones it's been like, okay, where we're tracking Blackstone points and doing cool things with like, we're going to trade them in for artifacts and things like that. This one does feel like you are playing a war game overseeing a bunch of individual war games.
Well, and it kind of reminds me, I'll state my age, but Rob, do you remember the old L5R they had? I never got to go to a convention where they had it, but each faction would have like 6 players, and then one would be sequestered in a room where they would decide which of their generals, aka the guy with the deck, would go play on which map, and they were trying to gain territories over the map based on the results were the games getting played out. This feels like that, other than the War Masters aren't sequestered in a room and only get results.
But you totally could.
Oh, you actually, yeah, you totally.
Do you want to sign up to get kidnapped for a weekend? Let's do this.
But
that's going to be an outtake.
Do not kidnap people for this.
But
maybe no.
Can't sign up on that.
We made you sign up. You signed a waiver. We can kidnap you.
But I think this goes to the thought where we've said, like, well, each Crusade, like the Crusade rules in a codex, is very codex flavored, and they don't play well together with other codexes. But the Crusades, well, you can kind of bring people together, but there's no big story behind it because most people are doing their own Crusade books more than this. This, I think, kind of anchors that in by having that macro element to it of this is the story, this is what you guys are playing for, kind of like what you were doing with the Urban Conquest, although I'm half tempted to say, if I'm doing this myself again, I'd say let's do the Crusade book, let's throw out the Codex stuff, because it just really gets in the way, especially like I'm going to use Tyranids as an example again. Tyranids are here to eat worlds. They pick a world, then they eat it. Then they pick another world, they eat it. They get bonuses for each, and a world might be like 2 or 3 battles. Well, here's a campaign that's all in one city. It makes no sense for you to be eating worlds, getting bonuses for this one city.
Well, the Tau one's the same way, where it's like at the beginning of a Tau campaign for Crusade, you generate a planetary system, and then you're trying to take over that planetary system through a combination of military and diplomatic means, and then if you complete all the worlds in the system, you create a new system, which you're unlikely to do within like a single weekend campaign, because they're only expecting this to be like a 6-week campaign. but yeah, it doesn't mesh well with the city stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and even those, there's some I'm still not entirely fond of, like the Sisters. To become a saint and actually go through the entire campaign thing, a lot of those things are nigh impossible to do. The Eldar one that just came out, you're more likely to get the negative results than the positive results when you play through the campaign, and I'm sorry, but I know that's what Eldar life is like, but that's just not fun. So,
or like the Blood Angels ones, you can't take Death Company until your people fall to the Black Rage as you go. Yeah, so like, and I think that that's one thing that's always bugged me about the faction level of Crusade is you have all these little mini games that neither interact with the overarching campaign or with each other in any meaningful way. So I'm fine with ditching that. And we've even said, hey, maybe we should get rid of Crusade until everybody has their codex out.
no.
Now, White Dwarf has done a little bit of releasing, because I think Votann have Crusade rules now.
Yes, and Votann's a lot like Tau or Tyrion's in the fact of, we're just trying to get resources from the planets. I guess you could all get your resources out of the city, but it doesn't make as much sense.
Right.
And it's, I'd say in the middle there, it's doable, but the rewards aren't great. I mean,
Now, one thing I did think was very interesting with this is something that Crusade has shied away from and actually kind of actively discourages is the use of epic heroes. And one of the reasons for that is epic heroes don't get experience. They never get battle honors. They never get more powerful. And yet because this particular battle does feature like 3 named characters who have fixed data sheets, because Harken World Claimer, Junith Arudia, Saint Celestine. It's like, well, somebody may want to use those, but they're going to be penalized for using them. So what they've added is the Mighty Champions rule. However, I will say the Mighty Champions rule assumes that you have a campaign master who is running the campaign. You don't get to select these for yourself. So in a Nachmund Gauntlet campaign, players should inform the campaign master whenever an epic hero unit is added to a Crusade force. The campaign master then assigns one of the following Crusade abilities to an epic hero model in that unit that best represents their lore and background. Then you increase the Crusade points by 1 for your force. And if an epic hero unit contains 2 or more epic hero models, only one of the models gets to have a Crusade ability. And basically there's 7 different ones: frontline champions, strategic champions, nemesis champions, inspirational champions, restorative, subtle, and logistical champions. And they like, hey, if you were fighting the campaign in this book, then Harken World Claimer is a frontline champion, Junith Arudia is a strategic champion, and Celestine is an inspirational champion. So, for example, that inspirational champion, when an epic hero model with this Crusade ability is leading a unit, you can ignore any or all battle scars that bodyguard unit has. In addition, if your army contains 1 or more epic models with this Crusade ability, you can pick an additional unit from your army to be marked for greatness. That's really cool.
Yeah.
no, I think these are really cool abilities, and I mean, if I'll go after like our campaign stuff we did last year, if I had this, I probably wouldn't have mind, because I had Azrael almost all the time. And for a couple of battles, I did throw in the Lion. And it would have been kind of cool giving an extra benefit, although Azrael doesn't need any more benefits. But nice to have an extra benefit, because it, like you said, it is feels bad that they don't have anything where they can get better. But on the flip side, I'll say with this, I kind of wish it would be like after 3 battles or something. So that way you see them also growing, because just getting it right away just feels like, well, here's a bonus. But on the flip side, I can see that, well, you might add them to your roster for a fight and then have them go away again. And so while you've added them, well, here they get a bonus. So
Right.
I can see either side of it.
And all these are very Crusade focused. Like, these aren't just generic buffs. They are all tied to like Crusade blessings, battle traits, out of action checks, things like that. I like it. It really does incentivize you to take epic heroes. I would say if you're using this rule, more people would be taking epic heroes than not. just because there's no real downside.
Seen a lot of people take epic heroes anyway.
Right. So this will definitely not dissuade anybody from doing that. This will just encourage that.
Oh my gosh, I just saw something, Kevin.
Yeah.
This, maybe I should look into Uthar the Destined for Atlanta if they include this book. Except then, do I have to get it approved by who's the campaign? I guess the guy who runs the entire event, or who chooses?
I mean, we do have Zach's email, so I can't imagine that he wants to be having to approve every single epic hero on every single list, though. Oof.
Right. That's why I'm like, So hopefully when they send out those packets, they'll have clarification on it. Because this, I think, for grand narrative purposes, would need to get clarified.
It's honestly one of those things, because I didn't really use the Crusade rules last year at the grand narrative. It was extra layer of complications, and I just didn't want to deal with it.
I used it for all the battle advancements, but I did not use... I tried to use the Votan one, but it got me no benefits. So
I basically didn't even track it. Like, I was like, there's too much other stuff going on at this event, and I just kind of ignored it. But if there's the caveat for like epic heroes and like still being able to give them advantages and things like that, then yeah, I probably would. Actually, I probably would have used it, because I did have a couple of named characters that I was using. So yeah.
So looking at, and we get into the kind of normal stuff that we see for one of these campaign books. We've got battle traits that are specific to the Crusade. I'm not going to go through these, but I do like how they're broken out. Monster and vehicle units, infantry units, mounted units, jump pack units, beast units. None of these are character specific. So if you have characters who are infantry or monsters, because like Pariah Nexus, they'd have like, yes, this is the infantry or the monster list. Unless you're a character, then you have to roll on a different list. Instead, you've got lists that are just based on unit type. And then they have an any unit list, but only units that have deep strike should roll on this, because they're all tied to like the surgical deep strike ability.
I actually appreciate this list that don't have, because they doesn't have characters, so it's just by unit type, because it makes it feel that these are going to be beneficial to whatever that type is. And truthfully, I've seen ones where you got characters, and a lot of times, if they didn't say excluding characters, I think one of the tables might not have, you could have had multiple tables you got to pick from, and you thus got more benefits. And I don't know. Also, I'm not a fan, after playing through, of pulling benefits from different campaigns. Because when we did ours, it was just pull from whatever from wherever. Well, now we've got like 3 books worth. That's a lot of things that you could just upgrade. And if things had different names, or you could... So I think it's best to probably keep the battle traits in whichever book you're using.
Then we get into Crusade relics, which several of these are tied to strategic deep strike, or getting, not all of them, but there's a few that are like tied to getting strategic asset points, but also just some general ones like conversion field. You have a 5-up invulnerable save, and if you save on a 6, the attacking unit gains a 1, something like that. Honestly, there's really not much point in looking at antiquity or legendary relics, because they take so long to earn that by the end of this campaign, you're unlikely to get anywhere near a legendary relic.
I will agree and disagree, because in the grand narrative, for the very last battle right before it, they like opened up the reliquary, so everyone got to pick a legendary relic.
Which is cool, but in most campaigns, if you follow the rules for Crusade, even you probably won't even see antiquity relics. You might at the very, very end, but it's one of the things that kind of bugs me about Crusade relics. Is like, yeah, these are great, but nobody, unless you're bringing a force from like a couple of campaigns ago. And I think because like the campaign bonuses and stuff are so wildly different, like from different campaigns, it's like, if you get a bonus here that helps with strategic deep strike, and you're playing in a campaign that doesn't have strategic deep strike rules, it does nothing. Unless you're allowed to like switch it out for something else.
You don't think it'd be helpful to be able to mine extra Blackstone during these missions?
No, probably not. Nor is it really useful in the Pariah Nexus to earn strategic asset points.
Right.
So then we get into the Nachmund Gauntlet Crusade battles rules, like the rules for setting up. And a lot of times it's easy to just kind of gloss over these because, oh, this is pretty standard stuff. This one, there's a couple of things that are very different in this one. One is we get into the whole primary and reinforcement waves. Step 11, declaring battle formations. You figure out which leader is going to be attached to what units and who's going to be in transports. And then once that's done, in Nachmund Gauntlet Crusade missions, units in players' primary waves cannot start in reserves, and units in reinforcement waves can only arrive through reserves.
Which technically that actually gets mentioned in step 2 when you're mustering your army.
Yes, when you muster your army, you must use the tactical reserves rules, which we will get to. And yeah, you have to you select a formation stance and then separate your army into waves.
Primary wave and 3 reinforcement waves, which means that leadership one that gave you a 4th one gives you more options.
Right. Mm-hmm. The other thing that's interesting is beginning and ending the battle. So beginning the battle, standard, like battle begins, you use the tactical reserves and strategic deep strike rules for all of these missions, meaning your reinforcement waves will arrive as the game unfolds and some of your units can perform surgical deep strikes. During the battle, the first player whose score reaches 10 or more victory points is said to have gained a strategic advantage in that battle. No, only VP scored from progressive objectives count towards that. Victory points scored from endgame objectives and from having a battle-ready army do not count towards gaining a strategic advantage. If you're battle-ready, you get an extra victory point. One thing I will note, unlike all other missions that have been printed to this point, these do not do things in like 5 or 10 points. It's all single, like, basically we've cut the number divided the number of points down by 10
pretty much.
If you have 10 points that you earn throughout the game, you get strategic advantage. The battle ends at the end of any battle round in which a player has gained a strategic advantage, or 5 rounds, whichever comes first. And then you figure out who wins based on final victory points. If they're tied, it's whoever got strategic advantage. So if somebody just dominates and earns 10 points, the game will end early. Which is a little odd, but I guess it does keep a game from being too one-sided.
I mean, I'm fine with that. And also, I did notice this one that it said, if one player has no models remaining at the start of the turn, the other one can continue to play so that you can still kind of play out. But it also does not say the battle ends if, like, you have no models on the field. So that's good.
Yeah.
Because I've seen times where, well, all your stuff's still in reserves, and that can easily happen in this one, but everything else has been shut off the board.
Right.
Yes. So in this case, you just get more waves come in, which I like.
So let's talk a little bit about this whole tactical reserves thing. So you, based on battle size, determines how many points you have. You know, incursion is 1,000, strike force is 2,000, onslaught is 3,000. Please, GW, tell us where 1,500 points sits. Is that incursion or strike force?
I don't think they have that. I don't
know. I think, yeah.
We don't have a 1.5.
Yeah. And the reason that matters is that determines not only how many points your army can have. And remember, this is Crusade. You can have a Crusade force, like an order of battle, that has more units than you can field in a game.
Yeah.
So you choose a stance, alpha, beta, or gamma. And the difference of those is alpha gives you more points per reinforcement wave, but you start with fewer points as the primary wave. Beta is down the middle, and gamma is way more in the primary, much smaller reinforcement waves.
And how I view those is when you're building your army, based on the points of your stuff, that'll kind of determine which one you end up picking.
Right. So, for example, 2,000 point game. If you picked alpha, you start with 900 points in your primary wave, and then each of your reinforcement waves is 550. Now, you'll do note, we said there are 3 reinforcement waves. But wait, wouldn't that give you 2,550 points on the table? No, because you pick you build 3 reinforcement waves, but you only get to use 2 of them during the game. And that's why if you get the one with you can have 4 reinforcement waves, you still only get to use 2 of them. It just gives you more options as to which one you want to bring in.
Kind of like you can view this as one of 2 ways in my mind is one, try and build each wave as balanced as possible, or have each reinforcement wave have your primary be balanced, but your each reinforcement wave be here's my melee guys, here's my guys that can take down a Titan, and so they each have one purpose. So then that way they actually feel like you called in the reinforcements to come do the specific task on what's hurting you right now.
I was gonna say when you said like build each detachment like balanced, I was like, you and I build lists very differently. Because I'm very much in the second camp.
Yeah. If you choose the beta formation stance, I wish they had used a name other than alpha, beta, or gamma. Like if they had gone like defensive, balanced, and aggressive or something like that, or like alpha, beta, and gamma doesn't tell me anything when I look at it. But beta is for 2,000 points is 1,000 points, so half your army primary wave, 500 points per reinforcement wave, and gamma is 1,100 primary, 450 replacement. Now at 2,000 points, I don't think that's too bad. At 1,000 points, this can make list building really hard.
It does, and because I wanted to suggest this to my group here, but 200's too little. That's like a unit or maybe a unit with a leader. 300's probably the most doable, but then you only have 400 on the board. So it is very rough to get things to fit in those. And also then when I brought up do we want to start a new Crusade with the Nachmund book coming out, even without seeing it, they were like, nah. I think that was because last time the Tyranids just overwhelmingly ate everybody, and I think people got a little burnt out by that.
I can definitely see that. Yeah, again, this is probably the most complex set of Crusade rules, and the Tactical Reserves rules, which are, if you are playing by the book, and again, your hobby is your own, you can ignore this rule if you want. You can absolutely ignore this rule. I think I kind of would. Although I know some of the missions are kind of balanced around it. I'm on the
flip side. I love this rule, and I want to use it. But don't worry, we're not including this in Midwest Conquest.
No.
But because I like the idea of the waves coming in. And so this is like one of the parts of the book I really liked, and I want to try out sometime.
I definitely like the idea of it.
Yeah, I don't know if I like the implementation. But I think for Crusade is already unwieldy. It feels like you would have, and especially as a force grows, because like if you start at Incursion and you work your way up to Strike Force, like you need to constantly be worrying about, okay, so like what are my points at and what can I take and I'm going to have to rework my detachments and come up, like it feels like there's so much extra to do in this. Like this is a complex system layered on top of a complex campaign system.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is like, I would say this is an advanced Crusade. Like if you could put difficulties on books, this would be like Pariah Nexus would be moderate. This would be advanced.
Right. And I could see that. And with like having the War Master kind of bolted on top, this kind of gives you more generalmanship yourself of you're doing the dividing of my army, seeing when I should deploy what. I also like it because, well, your opponent's in the same boat. So you're both kind of playing it out, waiting for other things to get there. So that'll help make your decisions. And also sometimes you get out of position if you've got too much on the table, if you don't have a lot of mobility. This helps address that, and that's also why I like putting things in Deep Strike, so that way I could have things come in where I need them later because, well, I'm talking about Photon here, that 5-inch movement doesn't get you very far on the board.
Right. Now, they do give an example of what a particular Crusade army with reinforcement waves might look like, and I do like this visual representation and kind of an explanation of like why they're broken out. So, for example, primary wave for the Space Marine Army: a Redemptor Dread, an Assault Intercessor Squad, a Scout Squad, and a Gladiator variant. This is the one that's always available. The infantry units are there to get objective markers. The Redemptor and Gladiator provide fire support. Reinforcement Wave 1 is a Gladiator, Lancer, and an Outrider, and they're like, hey, if there are monsters or vehicles, or we need to get somewhere quickly, we can use this wave. Reinforcement Wave 2 is a Captain, a Stern Guard Vet Squad, and an Impulsor. This is to deal with more stuff on the flanks. This is also where our Warlord is, so if this wave isn't used, then anybody who's got an agenda that involves killing the opponent's Warlord gets the points for that, and the Warlord won't gain any XP because they never made it onto the table. And then Reinforcement Wave 3 is an Assault Intercessor Squad and a Terminator Squad. Again, if you need to contest objective markers, or you want to deep strike these Terminators somewhere surgically to get the most use out of them, like, you might use this wave. So 2 of these waves will come into the game. 1 of them won't. Which one will be based on like what you need to have happen. So yes, from that standpoint, this is a really cool idea. I just think it's going to be a lot for people to wrap their head around, and at 1,000-point games, it's going to be really tricky to figure out how to build those.
Totally agree with that last part.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just don't know where I could put Angron in this. Like, I can't deep strike him at 1,000 points. Anyway, sorry.
I don't think he might just not show up.
Right.
You'd have to use him in like a 2,000-point game, and he is a reinforcement wave.
No, I know. I shouldn't be taking Angron at 1,000 points in a Crusade game. Period.
No, that is what we in the business call a dick move.
Right.
And then some discussion on how tactical reserves are used. When you deploy your Crusade army, you only deploy the primary wave. At the start of the reinforcement step of your movement phase in the second battle round, you select one of your reinforcement waves. Everything in that wave comes in through strategic reserves. At the start of your third battle round, or your reinforcement step, and the third battle round, you pick a second one. The units of in the remaining reinforcement wave or waves, if you have the fourth one, don't come in. They don't get XP, and anything that would count the Warlord as being destroyed, like I said, counts for this. Although the Warlord isn't actually destroyed, so there's no out of action test or anything. Also, in Nachmund Gauntlet, you cannot use the rapid ingress stratagem.
Yep. Which makes sense because of how you're deploying your armies. I think it's a necessity.
Yeah. And then if you are coming in from reserves, unless they are performing strategic deep strike, and we'll get to that in just a second, you can set that unit up within an inch of your own battlefield edge, even if they're enemy units within 9 inches. But if they are set up that way, so basically it's like you normally have the 6-inch range from a battlefield edge, or within an inch of your own, even if the enemy is in your backfield. However, if you are set up within 9 inches of an enemy unit, you can't be in engagement range. You are automatically battle shocked. So no strats, no OC. Now let's get to surgical deep strike, i.e. the rule that should be in 40K all the time.
Yes.
Because this is just cool and fun, and it feels like the right kind of throwback. It's a much better implementation of what we used to have with like random deep strike. So in these battles, you can once per turn, like one unit coming in can perform surgical deep strike, which is why that one thing where it allowed you to do 2 of them was a big deal. When a unit performs a surgical deep strike, set it up anywhere on the battlefield that is more than 3 inches horizontally away from all enemy models. Screw your balanced data slate, we're coming in at 3 inches, baby. That unit must then take a deep strike test. To do so, roll 2d6, subtracting 1 from the result for each enemy model, not unit, enemy model that is within 9 inches of your unit, excluding models that are battle shocked or that have OC 0. Then you compare them to the result on the deep strike test chart, and that will tell you what happens. And also they do specify anybody that has a rule that says, hey, units can't be set up within 12 inches of this unit, do apply to surgical deep strike. So if somebody's got like a disruptor field, you don't deep strike there. You just can't. So the deep strike test, if you get a 4-up on the 2d6 roll, your unit can act normally. They're set up, boom, they can act. if you are left at a 3-up, remember this is after subtracting for every enemy model within 9 inches, and so that means that can cut in the middle of enemy units. That's why they're counting by model. If you get a 3-up, the unit has to take a battle shock test. On a 2-up, your unit is just battle shocked. And on a 1 or less, you suffer a deep strike mishap, and you roll on the mishap chart. So, hey, if you can deep strike and roll high on the test, and there's not a lot of enemy models nearby, you may be totally fine. On the other hand, the mishap chart. Deep strike mishap. On a 1, you take D3 mortal wounds and are battle shocked. On a 2, you suffer D3 mortal wounds and go back into strategic reserve. You can't be set up this turn.
That's even worse in my mind than the
Oh,
one.
that's so much worse.
Off target for a 3, you suffer D3 mortal wounds, you are battle shocked, and you must immediately perform another surgical deep strike. You can't be within 12 inches of where you came in the last time.
Oh, God.
On a 4, you suffer D3 mortal wounds, you're battle shocked, and an enemy unit that's within 9 inches can make a normal move of up to D6 and move
gosh. Either move towards you or away from you or into cover. Yeah.
On a 5, you get a miss drop, you suffer D6 mortal wounds, you're battle shocked, and you can't charge.
Oh, that one's... No, I don't like that one.
And then disaster. You suffer D6 mortal wounds, you're battle shocked, and you can't shoot or charge.
Yeah, let me just have the first one. The one sounds best.
Yeah, and I like the flavor text. The first one, dangerous ingress. Whatever else has happened, this error may cost lives. Recalled under fire. Too late realized the strike zone is too dangerous. Off target. The strike is deviated, leaving troops out of position. Anticipated. The enemy was waiting to strike with deadly force. Misdrop. Survivors of this terrible mishap are left shaken and broken. Disaster. You have surely sent these warriors to their deaths.
I mean, I don't know how that's much different than normal, but yeah, sure. Make a big deal out of it this time. Be all dramatic about it this time, I guess.
But honestly, it's like I love these rules. I'm like, this should be in every 40K campaign. Like, this should be just in core rules. I'm here for it.
What I would love to see, like, as far as like an implementation of this, is like they took away the option of doing the 3-inch deep strike, so you can't like get close. This should be the trade-off. If you want to do the like surgical deep strike, you can get within 3 inches, but you then do this test. And like, I think that would be interesting because then there's a cool risk reward of like, I can drop these guys right where I want them, but there's a risk.
So if we were to put it in core rules, just a stratagem saying at the end of your movement phase when bringing in a deep strike unit, spend a CP to do a surgical deep strike.
I think that'd be awesome. Yeah. I think that'd be an awesome like core
I'm
strat.
for it. I'm for it.
Then you could limit it, like you only do it once, but you can bring in a specific unit to do like a very specific thing, very risk reward. Yeah, I like it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you just say like you target it, in your movement phase during the reinforcement step, target one unit that's in strategic reserves and that has the deep strike ability and may perform a surgical deep strike. See Nachmund Gauntlet book page 97.
Yeah.
I mean, theoretically, you could copy and repaste this, but I think GW might. So I guess as long as you're not distributing it for money, I don't know. I'm not sure what the legality on this is.
Well, the legality is GW puts this into the core rules and then makes a little FAQ. Then everyone just has the rules.
That's
right. Hear that?
That would be the best way to do it.
The best.
Let's see, and then we'll get in not really get into like Crusade blessings or agendas. Again, they're
okay. Well, I'll do my rant on Crusade blessings then.
Okay.
I don't think they work.
No, they don't.
I've seen them happen in both the grand narratives and in our little Crusade League, and 9 times out of 10 people forget about them. And then that one time you do remember about them, they don't seem to provide enough of a benefit to actually turn the tide or even the playing field. I mean, I hate saying this in the way, but the old blessing or rule where you just got command points based on the difference, that was probably the most balancing because command points are more powerful than anything they come up with in these blessings.
Mm-hmm.
So, on the other hand, one thing I will probably take from this and rework a bit. The Attacker and Defender Crusade blessings are very reminiscent of abilities in Urban Conquest.
Yes.
So I might rework that into and drop that into the pack I've been doing, which, by the way, if you would like access to the version 1.0, and I will continue to improve and expand on this as time goes on, but the 10th edition mission pack for Urban Conquest, which right now contains the 6 location-specific missions and a set of stratagems. I think it's like 10 stratagems to use for Urban Conquest and like City Fight games. You can join our Patreon. That is a patron exclusive. If you join the Preferred Enemies Patreon, you can get access to that mission pack. And so the reason I'm saying that is because I think, like their implementation of Firestorm, which is preliminary bombardment, or Dawn Assault, which is actually an ability taken straight from Urban Conquest, it's like I would love to drop these into that mission pack and just make them rules that I can apply to particular missions, or a stratagem or something that someone could use.
Mm-hmm.
Or even Urban Conquest, where it's like you use strategic points to do certain abilities. If they didn't do their cards in an odd size, I would like put up a document so like you can get these printed to like make playing cards and make a new like additional deck to add to. It's like, hey, if you control or like spend so many strategic points and you get to do preliminary bombardment against your opponent regardless of mission, like that would be cool. So that's something I might work into this.
If only we knew somebody who was good at graphic design.
The graphic, okay, to be like the graphic design, yeah, for doing cards and stuff, yeah, I would probably want Richard to help. The hard part is getting them printed to cut to the appropriate size, because
Sure.
for Urban Conquest cards they used very non-standard sizes.
Sure.
Yeah, and then you have to like try and match the material so that they don't.
True. True.
Just make your own deck.
Honestly,
like, for redoing the entire deck is the way to do it.
Right. Yeah. And like with Urban Conquest, the strategic bits of the deck, like that's its own little mini deck. You might actually be able to find the right card size for those. If I wanted to add new locations though, which I would love to do, like I'd love to build like, hey, the Emperor's Voice guns. That would be a cool location to make a custom mission for.
Yeah.
But those cards are not cut. Like I haven't seen any other card that has that same form factor. So those would have to be custom made.
Yeah,
or like Rich, like you suggested, Richard, redo the entire deck and just find something that fits in those pockets that's maybe a little bit more narrow.
Yeah.
And I think looking at the missions on this, like they're not bad. They're a lot more generic than some of like the Pariah Nexus or Tyrannic War missions, which are leaned very hard into like the, dealing with like the Tyranid onslaught or dealing with like Blackstone and warp shenanigans. Some of these are just very generic, like strategic strike, stranglehold, supply raid, frontline warfare, final stand, saboteurs. It's like
final stand slightly different. The defender does not have like left and right board edges, so they're kind of more contained and they're more forward. And like saboteurs is definitely different, where the only thing is happening in the defender's zone. The attacker's area really doesn't mean anything other than deployment.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And like, yeah, I'm just saying, like, narratively, these don't feel like as tightly tied to the particulars of the setting. And I think it's because they are just kind of general warfare missions.
Right.
Like, of all the missions, I think this is probably, if they weren't tied so much to like the Nachmund Gauntlet and thus kind of leaning into more on like the tactical reserves and stuff like that, and strategic asset points on a few things. Like, these are pretty good generic maps to use for any sort of mission.
And some of them are pretty crazy, like the Beachhead Offensive, where the attacker pretty much just has a semicircle to start with, and the defender has most of the board.
Right.
Or the Gauntlet, where the attacker's in a triangle on like a anvil where they're using short edges, and the defender can't set up in the middle, but they set up on the backboard edge, and the half of 2 sideboard edges, and the attacker's goal is to get to the other board edge.
Right.
So, I mean, they do provide, maybe not in context of the narrative, but the narrative for that battle is definitely there.
Now, one thing that's been brought up with like the missions, because we're using Urban Conquest, and we're using those 10th edition missions in our Urban Conquest, and we're also using missions from White Dwarf, the bunker missions, which are really good. They're a lot of fun to play, but a lot of them have these like objectives where there's no objectives maybe in one player's deployment zone, or in some cases there are, like a couple of cases, there are only objectives in no man's land, and there are a number of detachments now where the detachment ability depends on there being objective markers in every deployment zone, like there are in competitive games. And so, like, it's not so bad for your deployment zone, because your deployment zone is like always considered your area of control. But then, like, determining whether you control the middle or your opponent's deployment zone depends on there being objective markers there. And in a lot of these missions, there are not. Some of the army rules, it's not so much a problem with these missions, because I like having really creative missions, but like some army detachments don't work well with these missions, and so you kind of have to let your players know ahead of time, like, hey, are you taking the Canoptic Court? Yeah, maybe you don't want to, because the Canoptic Court doesn't function properly, or the Grey Knight or Thousand Sun Grotmus detachments don't necessarily function normally under these detachments, or they don't function correctly under these missions. So that's something you should let your players know. Fortunately, most factions now have enough options you can kind of work around that, but just something to be aware of. Along those lines, there's also like objectives like, Saboteurs has one, Final Stand has one, Retrieval has 3, where it's like these objective markers are on the border between the attacker's deployment zone or the defender's deployment zone and no man's land. Which zone do they count in?
Yes.
Yeah, they are both. Yes, they. So it's just like there's some army logistics things that you have to be aware of when building your forces. And again, it's just something that I think needs to be communicated to players and kind of come out with an appropriate answer so that they know what force to build. But like for the most part, I like the missions in here. I do think the scoring, because it's tied into we're only scoring up to 10 points for the strategic advantage, it feels very old school. I think we're so used to everything being in like up to 100 points.
Yeah, I was going to say either old school or disconnected, one of the two.
Right. Yeah. And it's not, I mean, it still has progressive scoring and a few endgame objectives. Like it's not wildly different functionally. It's just we're so used to objectives being done differently, where it's like if you used the tabletop battles to track these games, which you can, like that app is set up with all the points being in like 5 and 10 point increments. And so I'm wondering if they will create, like if you say, hey, we're doing a Nachmund Gauntlet mission, if it'll switch the controls to being like 1, 2, or 3.
I would hope so.
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, some of these also remind me of what I've put together for, like the Gauntlet reminds me of what I put together for Sniper's Alley, because it does like the alpha beta, like, hey, if you have a unit in alpha zone, it's worth 1 point. If you have a unit in beta zone, it's worth 2. If you have it in gamma zone, it's worth 3. And that's kind of what I did for Sniper's Alley and for like the Fortified Palace, where you're trying to get units into those like zones at the end of the game.
Right.
So it's nice that like if you are into mission design, this is really good to read and check out. And I need to check if our mission design episodes are still available, or if they are so old they've fallen off of our feed. But like when we had Pimpcron on the show, and talked about mission design. A lot of these kind of fall under that, where it's like, yeah, it's kind of like a basic mission, but there's just something that's a little bit different, or like the objective, like the deployment zones are a bit different, or where the objectives placed are different. And the addition of actions has expanded where they can go with design space on here. Yeah, I like these missions. I think they're pretty easy to implement. Again, you can, if you're not using them for Crusade, you can ignore the Victor bonus. Like, most of these will work fine whether you're using the Crusade rules or not.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm not using Crusade, a Victor bonus that gives me Crusade Forces supply limit up to 50, that sounds awesome, doesn't it?
So, yeah, in the end, I think the one thing, because it is a fight over a city, and maybe it is because, like, we have kind of come to the point where the standard 40k battle is just an urban battlefield. Like, that's all that seems to be supported and pushed these days. I guess there's not really anything special about city fight versus not city fight. I would love to see a little bit more city focused stuff, but a lot of the things that were unique to city fight, like plunging fire for ruins and things like that, have been kind of worked into the core rules, so they're not really special anymore.
No, all rules are special, Rob.
No, what I'll say is it does feel like, as you said, the Crusade books have been evolving, where the Tyrannic War is just, here's war. Blackstone is like, here's some extra objectives for you to try and get. And then this one really feels like they've clamped down and focused on an area. Yeah, I would like to get back to a more to have diverse terrain, but I don't know. We'll see where they go from here. But I do like the book. I love the storybook, and I think the part that got me the most was when it was mentioned that this reminds me of an old Imperial armor book. I'm like, yeah, you're right. This actually does, because it's got some missions you can do. It's got some, well, it doesn't have characters. I guess that's thankfully. But it's got the story, and the story is good. And truthfully, I like some of the rules and I like the missions. But if I were to pick up this book, it's probably mostly going to be because of the story, and I want to have that on there.
Yeah.
Which is odd, because normally we're picking up books and all this for the rules. It's kind of nice and refreshing that there's one that has a cool narrative story in it that, like, yeah, I want to read this, and I'm getting it more for that. And then the extra rules are kind of like, just here's some cool things you can do if you want to.
Yeah, like if I was buying this for the rules, I have reached a point where I'm kind of over Crusade as a system. It is a lot of bookkeeping, and because a lot of it feels like it's at the whim of the dice. And when I mean, like, yes, every war game is at the whim of the dice, but I have had Crusade campaigns where I cannot seem to keep any battle honors because I will fail out of action tests, and I'll end up with, like, either battle scars, or my battle scar is, oh, well, I guess I just lose a battle honor, or to the point where it's like, okay, these units have battle scars that make them unplayable. I'm just going to drop them from my Crusade, like my order of battle, and just add, my roster, and just put a replacement back in that it looks exactly the same.
This mostly are Tyranid players, and I've seen other players in Crusade do this a lot of, once a starting unit gets a battle scar, if it hasn't had any battle honors, yeah, just that's the standard action, is just get rid of them and replace them. Yeah. So it's almost like, are you really building them up? Because, I mean, an art could have ups and downs, but you're right. If you get, like, a battle scar, it might make a squad not really be functional anymore. So it's, yeah. And I think, like you said, being down on Crusade, I think the group here in Dallas they like narrative, but they're not as big on Crusade, if that makes sense.
Yeah. That's kind of how our group has panned out. We've done Crusade, and at the end, it's like, yeah, that was interesting, but it's like and when I say, like, comes down to the dice, we had a couple of players who they didn't fail any out of action tests, or if they failed, it was on a unit they could easily replace, but, like, a couple of their big powerful units just ended up rocking ahead on battle honors, but they never got so far ahead on Crusade points in their army that it ever really triggered any of the Crusade blessings. And as you said, even if it did, they don't do enough to make up for the difference in power. So yeah, Crusade gets very unbalanced very quickly.
Yep. When the
And-
winners keep winning and the losers just have to bear it.
Yeah, which I mean, may be true to the battlefield, but it's not fun to play against. Like, and I think that's the thing, is like a war game should still feel fun. And that's not to say like the players have been fine. It's just the game itself feels so one-sided. Joy, like afterwards you're like, well, going into that I really didn't have much of a chance anyway, and it doesn't feel like I told a very good story. And oh look, most all my stuff died and I failed two or three more out of action tests, so I'm never going to catch up, even if I mark someone for greatness. So yeah, like the Crusade, for me, like would I pick up this book for the Crusade portion? Probably not. Would I pick it up for the campaign? Like if I did not have access to an Urban Conquest set, which admittedly is long out of print and is a little bit tricky to get a hold of, you can find them on eBay, but there's not a lot of them out there. Yeah, if I wanted to do an urban campaign, I do wish it wasn't so tied to one particular city setup. And also it's like, I think having 3 factions and the way it's set up, it feels like you'd have to have at least 6 players, like 2 per faction.
No.
What do you think?
You need more.
Yeah.
Because 2 per faction is not enough. We tried that. I would say probably 12 is what I'd shoot for. Having 4 per side. Yeah.
So 13 because you'll want a campaign master too.
Well, the campaign master could be one of the players.
You could.
Because who wants to just sit around and adjudicate all day? I mean, they might want to play too.
That's true. But yeah, it's like you need to have a decently large group to make the campaign portion really worthwhile. If this is something where it's like, hey, my friend and I want to play a narrative campaign, this book is not going to give you that. There's too much to balance, and not like it's built under an expectation that you will have more than just 2 players playing. So whereas I think Tyrannic War or even Pariah Nexus, I think you could do with 2 players. It plays better with more, but I think you could do it with 2. But this, yeah, you need to have a large number of players. It is very constricted to one set of locations on one planet. And so for that, like I wouldn't probably buy it for me personally. I would not buy it for the campaign system. I would not buy it for the Crusade portion because I'm not really into the Crusade mechanics anymore, which means I would come down to I would buy it for the Surgical Deep Strike rule page, which is 1 page, and I would buy it for the missions. And only the missions up to like I would not buy it for the Onslaught, like the 3,000 point missions. So I'd end up buying this book for like 12 pages, which is not a good return on investment.
And see, at least I'd get more than you, because I want the missions, including the 3,000 point ones, even if I don't play them. I want the surgical deep strike rules. I want the little different ways to do your tactical reserves, and the story. So I've got a lot more pages.
The story, like from a narrative point, the story, which is like the first half of the book.
I just like seeing Celestine come in and do awesome things.
First, just over first third of the book. So I would end up using it, which is, so I would end up using it for maybe a third of the book. And knowing that this is going to be, let's see, what was I don't even know if they have the older books on the website anymore. Ways to play Crusade. Okay, so Nachmund Gauntlet, because it is still it's a $60 book. I don't know if I can justify this for a $60 book.
No, I will say that's a valid statement.
Yeah.
I would hope, I don't know, I would lean towards a 40 for this one, but I know they've been raising prices for everything.
I guess my thing is, like, it needs to either be cheaper, like you said, $40 and be exactly the way it is, or it needs to be $60 and have more of the old Imperial armor stuff in it, more pictures, more details. Like, I like the idea of selling narrative books and campaign books and like explaining the background lore of these battles, but I feel like this doesn't quite go into enough detail to justify the price, especially compared to like those old Imperial armor books that went into way too much detail.
Yeah, and that's like the other Crusade books have been interesting reason. Like I did pick up the Pariah Nexus book, and of course Tyrannic War they did a standalone book, but I have the core book from the 10th edition launch, so I have that. But yeah, this is like the first one that if I was going to buy I don't know if I would buy this for myself. And yeah, and again, it's like if I were really into Crusade, like the mechanics of Crusade itself, then I'd say, yeah, this is not a bad buy. Although, again, I would probably have to look at whether I could even get a campaign going of this if I had enough players to make that happen. And like right now, our group is about like 8 or 9 people consistently. This would still be a hard sell at that level because it's like you could work, but I don't think it'd feel as good.
Yeah, I'd say 8 or 9, especially if you got to 9, I'd say it'd be worth a try, but it also depends on what factions you've got and all that. I don't know. I think, to your point, Rob, had I not been doing like the US Opens and the narratives there and going to the grand narratives and trying to do the narratives on, I probably would pass on this book, but definitely because of going to the grand narrative, and I like the story in it. I do think this is a pickup for me.
I'd say for me personally, because this is a project I'm working on, the one place where I could see knowing what is in this book. I think if I came to this book sight unseen, it'd be a harder sell. If I just heard about like the campaign aspect, or somebody said, yeah, you got to have a bunch of players or something. But as somebody who is working on kind of doing an updated version of Urban Conquest, I'm seeing things here, like I mentioned the Crusade blessings, but I'm even looking at like the strategic site abilities, like a couple of them, like which is like I'd love to build a special location that is the Emperor's Voice Grand Battery, because having the ability to, hey, you can use a strategy, like something during the strategic phase of Urban Conquest to hurt somebody's reserves when they come in, and you get that free if you control the Grand Battery. That would be kind of cool. That would be cool. Like there's elements here that I'm like, I can work into this. And there's enough things in Urban Conquest that do work off of things coming in from reserve. I could even see working the tactical reserves aspect into it, although I would just have that as part of, like, rather than being like based off of your Crusade roster, just have it be like, hey, when you build your list, build it with, like, I just kind of put everybody down. It's like, yeah, build it as 1,000 is your primary detachment, and then 50 or 500 points for your waves, and use the tactical reserves. And then
wait, why not as like 1,950 points for each of your 2 waves?
We're gonna go old Demon Codex on here. You're gonna take your army, half of it is one wave, half of the other, and roll to find out which one you get.
I actually had to explain that to one of our players because he's trying out Tzeentch demons, and I said, yeah, the old school. And I think that might be part of why when I do a lot of list building, I build like it in halves. I like to have 2 of everything. And that might be from when I played Slaanesh Demons back in the day, where
I think that you were scarred by that.
Yep, I might be, but I mean that's why I have 2 land fortresses. I want 2 things of my Terminators. I want 2 of or I have 4 Sagittars because it's 2 pairs of 2.
I think there's a lot of Demons players out there that have hobby PTSD thanks to that book.
Yeah, probably.
Oh my.
So, yeah, I would say it's not a bad book. I don't think it's necessarily a book for me, but if you're like hardcore into Crusade, and especially like you said, Dennis, like if you've got the grand narrative coming up, which may very well use this, assuming they don't release anything else. Although isn't the current narrative is based on what, like Octarius
Yes,
or
but
Chilath?
in the past, they've allowed rules from all Crusade books that GW has printed.
Yeah.
I mean, some of them might not do anything for you, because strategic asset points will do nothing probably for this, but you can at least use the battle traits if there's any that are unique or cool.
Okay, so the current grand narrative is set in the Cassandra system, which is where like Operation Hivestorm and all the kill team stuff is based. So okay, so again, not set in this. But I guess you can use battle traits from this.
Battle traits and relics are the biggest ones.
Yeah. Which is fine. Again, I think some of it's going to depend on if they let you do surgical deep strikes.
Yeah, I want that.
Which again,
that would be cool.
I want so bad to just copy paste this into my Urban Conquest packet. I feel like I shouldn't, but I'm real tempted.
Well, I guess I should tell you this first, Rob. I believe we are looking at having surgical deep strike in the Midwest Conquest narrative, adding that as one of the rules.
Yeah.
So
somebody's going to have to copy paste it. So I'll let you guys fall on that legal.
Kevin and I really liked it, so
yeah, it's very good.
No, I like this mechanic, and I think it would be a lot of fun for like our other players to like play around with, especially if in an urban campaign.
So I feel like I need to take this smooth segue into talking about the Midwest Conquest Grand narrative event.
Only the smoothest of segues around here, my friend.
I know. Yeah, exactly. Let me hop on my Segway and roll right over now. So, Midwest Conquest narrative event. There are still 12 tickets available, so you can sign up through MidwestConquest.com. Yeah, we haven't put the missions out yet, but we're probably going to use some of these missions and some of these rules. So it's not going to be a Crusade event. We're not using the Crusade rules, but we're going to definitely crib some stuff from this book and other books.
I mean, stealing is the most sincere form of flattery, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's borrowing and I mean, inspiration, inspired by.
And GW has printed these, so it means they've thoroughly tested them and are good, right?
Sure.
The answer is yes. Go on.
Yes, that is exactly what that means.
Because that's how it's always played out, right?
Exactly.
You're right.
Exactly. If you're interested in other Midwest Conquest events, we also have a GT, we have an Age of Sigmar event, we have Bolt Action, we have Beer Hammer, there's a Night Joust, there's all sorts of fun
We have
events,
a waiting list for Beer Hammer now.
I know. It's so cool.
Beer Hammer's sold out. Yeah. MidwestConquest.com for signing up for any and all of those events. And if you are interested in Beer Hammer, there's a contact page on the site. Just send us a message and let us know. It's like, hey, I want to go, but I'd like to get into Beer Hammer on Friday night, but we'll put you on the waiting list. And if there end up being spots open, we can take care of you then. Also, if you are interested in seeing the Urban Conquest mission pack, which I might be borrowing some elements from a Nachmund Gauntlet to expand upon that, and also I've got a couple of typos to fix and things like that, you can join our Patreon. Go to patreon.com/preferred enemies. It's basically an online tip jar. We don't charge for access to any episodes, but we do want to have some things that are specific for our patrons. So if you would like to check out the Urban Conquest mission pack and also just hang out with a cool community of people who just love talking games, sharing hobby stuff, and talking about a little bit of anything. We had discussions after the LVO announcement. We had discussions about what happens if there's a grand tournament at the Adult Video Awards and what that game would be like. So just kind of give you a little bit of a hint of what our kind of shenanigans our Discord gets up to. But we would love to see you there. Again, it's patreon.com/preferred enemies. It's only $1 a month. We don't have tiers. We still do hold. I think I should throw the $200 tier up there in case someone wants an amulet of FOMO made for them every month.
Heck yeah. I have a 3D printer. I can come up with something.
But yeah, other than that, no tiers. So enough people add in $1, it adds up, and so far you are keeping us income neutral. You pay for our hosting, you pay for our recording services, and we really do appreciate everything that our patrons have done to help support us over these years. So if you would like to be part of that, patreon.com/preferredenemies, or go to preferredenemies.com/merch if you want to rep the podcast by buying some of our merch, hats, beanies, mugs, t-shirts, any of those we have with like the Preferred Enemies logo or our Anxious Commissar art. So we'd love to see that out in the wild as well. But I think that pretty much covers everything we want to talk about with Nachmund Gauntlet. We've got some ideas coming up for future episodes. We're kicking around, and obviously in May, it'll be Midwest Conquest. So again, if you are not signed up for the narrative, we've already got at least 1/3 of the slots filled. We would love to see more people there. So if you want to join us in May on Memorial Day weekend in Independence, Missouri at Midwest Conquest, we'd love to see you then. But until then, from all of us here at Preferred Enemies, I'm your host, Rob.
Kevin?
Dennis?
And Richard.
Good night, good gaming, and get some campaign play in, whether it's Crusade or not.